2/3 of all the gold circulating in the medieval world came from one place on earth, and in 1352 a Moroccan lawyer crossed the Sahara on a camel to see it with his own eyes. His name was Ibn Battuta, and what he wrote down is the only eyewitness account we have of the Mali Empire at its absolute peak. Think about that for a second. Without this one man's travel diary, an entire golden civilization would be a rumor. He was 48 years old. He had already walked further than almost anyone alive. China, India, Persia, the Maldives, Constantinople. But the Sahara crossing nearly killed him. He left from Sijil Mesa in southern Morocco with a caravan carrying slabs of salt. Because here is the thing you have to understand about West Africa. In the 1300s, salt was the currency, salt was the leverage, and the salt came from a place called Taghaza. Taghaza was a town built out of salt, literally. The walls were salt blocks, the roofs were camel hides stretched over salt beams. There were no trees, there was no soil, there was nothing to eat except what the caravans dragged in. And Ibn Battuta described it with the kind of disgust you can almost taste through the page. He called it a village with no good in it, but the miners were slaves, and the slabs they cut were worth their weight in gold once they reached the Niger River. So the caravans came, and he went with them. Now here is where it gets strange, because Ibn Battuta was not some wide-eyed tourist. He was a trained Islamic judge. He had served sultans. He had argued law in Delhi, and when he finally arrived at the Mali capital of Niani, after months in the desert, he was furious. Why? Because the emperor did not give him a proper welcome gift. That is the first twist nobody warns you about. The man whose diary is now the single most important source on the Mali Empire spent a good chunk of it complaining that the king was cheap. The king was Mansa Suleyman, the brother of the legendary Mansa Musa, the richest human being who has arguably ever lived. And when Ibn Battuta finally got his audience, he was handed 3 loaves of bread, a piece of fried beef, and a gourd of yogurt. He was insulted, he said so out loud, in court, to the emperor, and somehow he lived. If this is already pulling you in, hit subscribe, because the deeper you go into the story, the weirder it gets. Because here is what Ibn Battuta saw at that court, and why historians cannot stop arguing about it. The protocol at Niani was elaborate beyond anything he had witnessed in Asia. When subjects approached the Mansa, they removed their clothes down to a loincloth, they threw dust on their heads, they prostrated and beat the ground with their elbows while the emperor spoke. Court poets in feathered masks recited the king's lineage. Armed guards stood with golden swords and quivers of gold and silver, and Ibn Battuta, the man who had seen the Mongol courts and the palaces of Delhi, wrote that he had never seen ceremony quite like it. But then, he wrote something else, something that has divided scholars for 600 years. He praised the people of Mali for their justice. He said you could travel the empire alone without fear of robbers. He said they prayed on time, memorized the Quran, and punished their children for skipping it. And in the same breath, he condemned them. He was horrified that women walked freely in the markets without veils. He was horrified that the emperor's own daughters appeared in public unclothed. He was horrified that men allowed their wives to have male friends. So which Ibn Battuta do you believe? The one who admired the order, or the one who recoiled from the freedom? Because both of them are writing the same paragraph. And this is what makes his account so maddening and so precious. He is filtering one of the most sophisticated civilizations on earth through the eyes of a North African legal scholar who is constantly offended. Every observation has a thumb on the scale. Every detail is shaded by what he expected to see and did not. Historians have spent careers trying to separate the reporting from the editorializing, trying to figure out which customs he exaggerated to make a point, which ones he softened because they embarrassed him, and which ones he flat out left out. Because he did leave things out, we know he did. Compare his account to the Arab geographers writing about Mali from a distance. And there are gaps. The gold mines themselves, for instance. Ibn Battuta describes the gold trade. He describes the caravan economics. He describes the weight of dust and the price of slabs, but he never visits the mines. He never names the workers. He never explains the process. Why? One theory is that he was not allowed. The Mali Empire kept the location of its gold sources a state secret. The southern forest regions where the gold was actually mined were closed to outsiders. Even the emperor reportedly did not know exactly where it came from. The miners spoke a different language. They traded silently. They left piles of gold dust on the ground and waited for the salt traders to leave matching piles of salt. No words, no negotiation, no witnesses. That is called the silent trade, and it controlled 2/3 of the world's gold supply. Ibn Battuta heard about it. He wrote about it secondhand, but he never saw it, because nobody outside that specific chain of trust ever did. So picture what he actually mapped. He mapped the visible half, the salt route, the court at Niani, the river towns along the Niger, the infrastructure of an empire whose actual wealth engine was deliberately hidden even from its own ruler. And then, suddenly, he left. This is the part historians cannot agree on. Ibn Battuta spent about 8 months in Mali, and then, without much explanation in his own words, he packed up and headed north. He claimed he received an order from the Sultan of Morocco to return. Maybe that is true. Maybe it is not, because there are hints in the text that something else happened. He mentions a falling out. He mentions a feast at which he believes he was poisoned. He mentions feeling unwell. He mentions tensions with other scholars at court. He mentions disputes about gifts and payments. Did he leave because he was summoned, or did he leave because he had overstayed his welcome in a court where insulting the emperor's hospitality had finally caught up with him? We will probably never know. The diary goes quiet on the exact reason, and then he is back across the Sahara, back in Morocco, dictating his memoir to a scribe named Ibn Juzay, who polishes the prose and arranges the chapters and probably, almost certainly, edits some things out. So what you read today as the great eyewitness account of Mali is actually a layered document. The experiences of one offended judge, filtered through his memory years later, shaped by a ghostwriter, aimed at a Moroccan royal audience that wanted to hear certain things and not others, and it is still the best source we have, by a mile. Everything else about Mali at its height, the wealth, the scholarship, the architecture of Timbuktu, the court ceremony, the salt and gold balance that propped up Mediterranean economies, we know because of fragments, tax records, later travelers, archaeological digs, the maps Europeans drew based on rumors from Saharan traders. But the eyewitness, the man in the room when Mansa Suleyman handed him 3 loaves of bread and a piece of beef, is Ibn Battuta, alone. And here is the part that should stop you. He almost did not write any of it down. When he returned to Morocco, he had no plans to publish. He was tired. He was old. He wanted to settle. It was the Sultan of Morocco who ordered him to dictate his travels for posterity. Without that royal command, the only first-hand account of medieval Mali at its peak would have died in the head of one man and been buried with him. An entire empire's golden age survives because a king in Fez was curious. Think about everything else we have lost that way. Every traveler who came home and told their stories to a tavern and a fireplace, and nobody wrote it down. Every kingdom remembered only by the people who happened to outlive it. Every Taghaza built of salt melted away. Ibn Battuta complained about the bread. He sneered at the women. He missed details. He probably embellished others. He left in a hurry under circumstances he would not fully explain. And he is the reason you can say the name Mali today and picture anything at all. History does not preserve the truth. History preserves whoever bothered to write it down, with all their grudges and blind spots intact. And sometimes the only window into a vanished world is a cranky lawyer who thought the king should have fed him better. If that hit you, drop a like and subscribe, because there are more forgotten witnesses where this one came from.